James Parker had always believed that trust was the foundation of a strong marriage. He and his wife, Emily, had been together for 12 years. Years filled with laughter, shared dreams, and a life they had carefully built. They had a beautiful suburban home, a comfortable lifestyle, and what James thought was a stable, loving relationship. But the truth, as he would soon discover, had been hiding beneath the surface for years. James was a hardworking man, a senior project manager at a construction firm. His job required long hours and occasional business trips. He took pride in providing for his family, ensuring that Emily never had to worry about finances. She worked part-time as an interior decorator, a career she had pursued more as a passion than necessity. Their marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage ever was. But James believed that they were solid, that their bond was unbreakable. Yet, lately, something felt off. It wasn't obvious at first. It was in the little things, the way Emily would be glued to her phone late at night, the hushed tones in which she spoke when taking certain calls, the quick way she would lock her screen when he entered the room. He had noticed how she had started dressing up more, even when she wasn't meeting clients. How she had suddenly taken a renewed interest in the gym, something she had never cared for before. New fitness goals, she had told him with a laugh, brushing off his questions. James didn't think much of it initially. People changed, picked up new habits. Maybe she just wanted to feel better about herself. Maybe he was overthinking things. But then there were the unexplained absences. Emily had always been meticulous about her schedule. She planned her days carefully and rarely deviated from them. But now, there were gaps, moments where she was unreachable, where she would return home with vague explanations about errands that took longer than expected. One evening, as James sat on their couch flipping through emails on his laptop, he decided to ask her outright. "You've been going out a lot lately," he said casually. "Everything okay?" Emily, who was sitting across from him scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. "Yeah, just work stuff. Clients, you know." James nodded, but something in her voice didn't sit right with him. "Anything interesting? New projects?" She hesitated, just for a second, before replying, "Not really. Just small gigs here and there." A flicker of doubt ignited in James's mind. Emily loved talking about her projects. She would describe her designs in detail, show him mood boards, ask for his opinion. But now she seemed uninterested in sharing. Still, he pushed the thought away. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling that something was wrong only grew stronger. There were nights when Emily would claim she was exhausted and go to bed early. Yet when James checked, she was still awake, texting someone with an expression that was unreadable. Then came the night that truly unsettled him. It was a Thursday. James had returned from a long day at work and was looking forward to a quiet evening. Emily had mentioned earlier that she would be meeting a friend for dinner, someone named Lisa. He had no reason to doubt her, until he accidentally overheard her conversation while passing by the bedroom. "Yeah, he has no idea," she whispered, laughing softly. "I told him I'd be out with Lisa. We're in the clear." James froze outside the door, heart pounding. He didn't hear the rest of the conversation because all he could focus on was the sickening realization that Emily was lying to him. Who was she talking to? Where was she really going? For the first time, suspicion began to consume him. But he wasn't the kind of man to act on impulse. No, James was calculated, logical. If there was something going on, he needed proof. So, he did something he never thought he'd do. He started paying closer attention. The next morning, while Emily was in the shower, he picked up her phone. It was locked, of course, but he knew her password. They had always shared everything. Or at least, he thought they did. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked it, scrolling through her messages. At first, there was nothing unusual. Conversations with her family, a few client messages. But then he saw a chat labeled with just a single letter. D. James clicked on it. And that was the moment his world began to shift. The messages weren't overtly incriminating. No declarations of love, no explicit texts. But there was a clear familiarity, an ease in their exchanges that unsettled him. D. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Emily, me too. Same place? D. Of course. Usual time? Emily. Yes, and don't be late this time, smiley face. James felt his stomach drop. He read the text again, hoping he had misunderstood. Same place. Usual time. This wasn't just an innocent conversation. Emily was meeting someone. Regularly. James put the phone down as he heard the water stop in the bathroom. His mind raced. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but something held him back. He needed to know more. The doubt that had been gnawing at him for months had now turned into something undeniable. His wife was hiding something, and whatever it was about to come crashing down. James felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. The woman he had trusted, loved, and built a life with was hiding something from him, something that could destroy everything they had. But he wasn't going to rush into a confrontation. He needed more than just vague texts. He needed undeniable proof. That night, he lay in bed beside Emily, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully. His mind raced with possibilities. Who was Dee? How long had this been going on? Was it just emotional, or was it worse than that? By morning, he had made up his mind. He was going to find out the truth. James started paying closer attention to Emily's routine. He noted when she left, where she claimed to be going, and how long she was gone. It wasn't difficult. Emily had always been predictable, but now, there were cracks in her story. On Monday, she told him she had a client meeting across town. But when he casually checked the GPS history on her car later that evening, he saw that she had been somewhere else, an address he didn't recognize. Wednesday, she said she was meeting Lisa again, but James decided to call Lisa himself. "Hey, Lisa, it's James," he said when she answered. "Emily said you two had dinner tonight. How was it?" There was a brief pause before Lisa replied, "Dinner? No, I haven't seen Emily in weeks." James clenched his jaw. Lies. It was happening right in front of him, and Emily thought she was getting away with it. That's when he decided to take it a step further. On Friday, he left work early and parked his car a few blocks from their house. He had noticed a pattern. Emily would leave around 6 p.m., claiming to meet clients or friends, and return home late. Tonight, he would follow her. His heart pounded as he watched from a distance. At exactly 6:15 p.m., Emily stepped out of the house. She was dressed better than usual, tight jeans, a blouse that clung to her figure, high heels. She looked excited. For the first time, James felt something close to rage bubbling inside him. He gripped the steering wheel and waited until she drove off before pulling onto the road and tailing her at a safe distance. 15 minutes later, Emily pulled into a dimly lit parking lot outside a cozy little bar. James parked across the street and watched as she stepped out of the car, smoothed her hair, and walked inside. 2 minutes later, a man arrived. James didn't recognize him at first. He was tall, broad-shouldered, well-dressed. And then, as he got closer to the bar's entrance, the realization hit James like a punch to the gut. David Carter. James's stomach twisted. David was an old friend, someone who had been in their social circle for years. He and Emily had always been friendly, but James had never thought anything of it. Now, as he watched them greet each other, Emily's hand lingering on David's arm, his easy smile as he leaned in close, he felt sick. This was the man she had been sneaking around with. James clenched his fists, his breath coming in short, controlled bursts. He could storm in there right now, confront them, demand answers. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't be enough. No, he needed undeniable proof. Reaching into his glove compartment, he pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos. Emily and David at the bar, their heads close together, their hands brushing against each other. He took a deep breath and recorded a short video as well, capturing the moment when David leaned in to whisper something in Emily's ear and she laughed, her fingers grazing his cheek. That was enough. For now, James spent the next few days in a haze. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The betrayal burned inside him like an open wound, and yet, Emily continued on as if nothing had changed. But James had changed. He began to test her, asking casual questions about her day, watching for the small hesitations in her answers. She was good, too good. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he might have believed her. Then, she made a mistake. One evening, as she was in the shower, James noticed her phone buzzing on the nightstand. A message from David. "D, tomorrow, same time?" Emily, "Yes. Miss you." James's vision blurred with fury, but instead of reacting, he took a deep breath. If she was meeting David again, he was going to make sure she didn't see it coming. The next evening, James told Emily he had to work late. She barely reacted, simply nodding as she typed away on her phone. He knew exactly who she was messaging. At 6:30 p.m., Emily left the house. James was already in position. He had parked near the bar an hour earlier, waiting. This time, he wasn't alone. He had invited a friend, Mark, a private investigator he had met through work. Mark had his camera ready. At 7 p.m. sharp, Emily arrived. She looked even more excited than the last time, practically glowing as she stepped into the bar. 5 minutes later, David walked in. Mark got to work immediately. Photos, videos, clear shots of Emily and David holding hands, laughing, leaning into each other. And then, the moment James had been waiting for, David pressed a kiss against Emily's lips. Mark caught it all. James felt an odd sense of relief. The doubt, the second-guessing, it was gone. This was real. It was happening. Now, it was time for the reckoning. James waited until Emily returned home that night. She walked in with a satisfied smile, oblivious to what was coming. "Hey, babe," she said, kicking off her heels. "Long day." James sat in the living room, his laptop open. "Yeah, you." Emily shrugged. "Just the usual." He exhaled slowly. "Come here for a second." She hesitated, but walked over. As soon as she sat down, James turned the laptop screen toward her. The color drained from her face. On the screen were the photos, the videos, every single moment he had captured. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. James finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "How long, Emily?" Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape. I can explain." "No," he cut her off. "You can't. Because I don't want to hear any more lies." Tears welled in her eyes, but James wasn't moved. Not anymore. She had hidden this affair for years. And now, because of one mistake, it was all out in the open. And she had no way out. Emily sat frozen, her eyes darting between the damning evidence on the screen and James's cold, unyielding stare. The silence in the room was deafening. She opened her mouth again, her voice trembling. "James, please, it's not what it looks like." James let out a bitter laugh. "Not what it looks like." He gestured toward the screen. "Emily, I have photos, videos, text messages. I literally watched you kiss him." Her lower lip quivered. I made a mistake." James clenched his jaw. "A mistake?" He slammed the laptop shut, making her jump. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean. Sleeping with another man for months, maybe years, isn't a mistake. It's a choice." Emily buried her face in her hands. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. James shook his head, his anger simmering just below the surface. "You didn't mean to get caught. That's the only thing you regret." She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes pleading. "I love you, James. Please, we can fix this. I was just confused. David and he doesn't mean anything." James exhaled sharply. "Then why did you tell him you missed him?" Emily's breath hitched. She had no answer. James stood up, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "I trusted you, Emily. I thought we had a good life. But the whole time, you were sneaking around behind my back." He turned toward the stairs. "I can't even look at you right now." She reached for him, her voice desperate. "James, please. I'll end it. I swear." He pulled away. "It's already over." And with that, he walked away, leaving her in stunned silence. James didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. What now? He had all the evidence he needed. But how far was he willing to take this? By morning, he had made up his mind. Emily had betrayed him, but she wasn't the only one at fault. David, his so-called friend, needed to face consequences too. James grabbed his phone and made a call. "Hey, Mark," he said when his friend picked up. "Remember that footage you took?" Mark chuckled. "Yeah, hard to forget. What's the plan?" James stared out the window, his expression unreadable. "I want everyone to see it." Later that afternoon, James sent an email. The recipient? David's wife, Rebecca. James kept it short and direct. Subject: You deserve to know the truth. "Hi, Rebecca. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your husband has been having an affair with my wife, Emily. I have proof, photos, texts, videos. I'm attaching everything here. You don't deserve to be lied to. Neither did I." James. He hesitated for only a second before hitting send. A weight lifted from his chest. David wasn't walking away from this unscathed. That evening, James sat on the couch, waiting. He had told Emily they needed to talk, and now she stood in front of him, her hands twisting nervously. "I thought about what you said," James began. "About fixing things." Hope flickered in her eyes. "Yes, James, I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need." James tilted his head. "What I need," he said slowly, "is a divorce." Emily paled. "No, No, James, please. It's non-negotiable. He stood up, towering over her. You threw away our marriage the moment you chose him over me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But what about our life? Our home? Everything we built? James's face remained impassive. You should have thought about that before you cheated. Emily collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. But James felt nothing. She had made her bed. Now, she had to lie in it. James didn't have to wait long for Rebecca's reaction. The next morning, he got a text from an unknown number. Unknown? James, it's Rebecca. I don't even know what to say. Thank you for telling me. I confronted David. He denied it at first, but when I showed him the proof, he had nothing to say. I'm done. I've already contacted a lawyer. James allowed himself a small smile. But Rebecca wasn't done. An hour later, she posted everything online, exposing David and Emily's affair for everyone to see. James scrolled through the comments. What a disgusting betrayal. Emily and David deserve each other. Karma always comes back. The damage was done. David had just lost his wife, his reputation, and soon, he'd be losing a whole lot more. James wasn't finished. Emily had hurt him, but now, it was her turn to feel the consequences. He had already spoken to his lawyer. The divorce papers were ready. And thanks to the evidence, Emily wasn't getting a dime more than she deserved, which, after her infidelity, wasn't much. That evening, James placed the papers on the kitchen table. Emily stared at them, shaking her head. You really won't give me another chance? James met her gaze, his voice cold. No. She sniffled, wiping her tears. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. Emily looked like she wanted to argue, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and let out a choked sob. James smirked. Let me guess. David. She nodded miserably. James already knew what the message said. David was cutting her off. She had destroyed her marriage for him, and now, she had nothing. Emily dropped onto the chair, completely broken. James didn't stay to watch. He grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving her to deal with the ruins of her choices. The house felt empty. James stood in the doorway of what used to be his home, staring at the scattered remnants of a life he no longer recognized. The divorce papers were signed. Emily was gone. Her departure had been dramatic, pleading, crying, trying to guilt him into staying. But James hadn't wavered. He had let her go. Now, he was left with silence. For the first time in years, he was alone. And for the first time in years, that wasn't a bad thing. James hadn't spoken to Emily since she left, but he knew things weren't going well for her. Word spread fast. David had abandoned her. Rebecca had taken him to court, and he was now fighting a nasty divorce battle of his own. Emily, on the other hand, had no safety net. She had no job, no place to stay, and no support. James heard from a mutual friend that she had been staying with her sister, but that didn't last long. Apparently, her sister had kicked her out after realizing what she had done. Now, she was couch surfing with whatever friends she had left, most of whom had distanced themselves after the affair came to light. James couldn't bring himself to feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now, she was living with the consequences. James had thought exposing David would be satisfying, but he hadn't expected just how quickly everything would unravel for him. After Rebecca's online post went viral, David's professional life took a hit. His company had a strict no fraternization policy, and when the affair was exposed, HR had no choice but to investigate. Within a week, David was fired. No severance, no recommendations, just a pink slip and a ruined reputation. Rebecca, meanwhile, had taken swift legal action. Thanks to James's evidence, her lawyer had a strong case for infidelity, and David was looking at a brutal financial settlement. The last James had heard, David was scrambling to find another job while dealing with the fallout of his personal and professional failures. It was poetic justice. James had expected to feel broken, angry, hollow, but instead, he felt free. For the first time in years, he wasn't living in a lie. He wasn't trapped in a marriage that had been rotting beneath the surface. He was done, and now, it was time to move forward. He started by reclaiming his space. The house, his house, needed change. He got rid of old furniture, repainted the walls, and replaced the bed he had once shared with Emily. Every trace of her was wiped away. He also started focusing on himself. He went to the gym, picked up old hobbies, and spent time with friends he had neglected during his marriage. He wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. James thought he had heard the last of Emily. But then, Late one evening, his phone rang. Emily. He stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Finally, he picked up. There was silence for a moment, then a soft, broken voice. James. He said nothing. She sniffled. I don't know where to go. James exhaled slowly. That's not my problem, Emily. A choked sob. I messed up. I know I did. I lost everything. My home. My friends. David. He doesn't even talk to me anymore. James remained silent. Can we just talk? Please, she whispered. I just need someone. James shook his head. You had someone, Emily, he said, his voice firm. You had me, and you threw it all away. She let out another broken sob. I'm sorry, she whispered. James closed his eyes. Goodbye, Emily. And then he hung up. James set his phone down, exhaling deeply. That was the last time he ever spoke to Emily. He expected to feel something. Regret, sadness, maybe even guilt. But there was nothing. Just silence. And peace. For the first time in years, he had closure. Emily's suffering wasn't his concern anymore. She had made her choices. Now, she had to live with them. And James? James was finally free. With Emily officially out of his life, James focused on himself. He had spent so much time being the perfect husband, the dependable provider, the man who sacrificed everything for his marriage. But now, he was living for himself. He started by traveling, something he and Emily had always put off. A week in Italy, a road trip along the coast, exploring places he had only ever dreamed about. With every mile he traveled, he felt lighter, as if he was shedding the weight of the past, piece by piece. One of the biggest regrets James had during his marriage was losing touch with friends. Emily had never explicitly told him to distance himself, but the subtle manipulations, the guilt-tripping whenever he wanted to go out, the complaints about his friends being bad influences, had done the job. He had slowly pulled away. But not anymore. He reconnected with his college friends, catching up over drinks and late-night conversations. They welcomed him back like no time had passed. You look better, one of them noted during a night out. Like lighter. James laughed. That's because I am. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. James had convinced himself that he was done with love. After what Emily had done, how could he ever trust anyone again? But life had other plans. It started casually, meeting new people, going on a few dates. Nothing serious. Just learning how to enjoy the moment again. And then he met Rachel. She was different. Warm. Genuine. No mind games. No hidden agendas. Just real, honest connection. At first, he was hesitant. But Rachel didn't push. She understood. And slowly, piece by piece, she helped him remember what love was supposed to feel like. Not obligation. Not sacrifice. Just happiness. James never reached out to Emily again, but he still heard about her from time to time. She bounced between short-term jobs, never really settling anywhere. David had completely abandoned her. After losing his job, he had left town, cutting all ties. Emily had no one. Last James heard, she was living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. It was ironic. For years, she had lied and manipulated, believing she had everything under control. And now, she had nothing. People always say that revenge is about getting even, about making the other person suffer. But James had learned something different. The best revenge wasn't anger. It wasn't destruction. It was moving on, living well. And that's exactly what he did. James built a new life, one free from lies, betrayal, and the weight of a broken marriage. And as he stood on a quiet beach one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he smiled. For the first time in years, he was truly, completely happy.